The views expressed on this broadcast of Speaker Monday with your host, the Monty Man, do not necessarily reflect the opinions of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT is not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Just when you think you have all your ducks in a row, life takes a spin. It happens again and again. It seems to me that when I take my will and let you go, without the booze, I've been living, that's a fact. Without the booze,
I've been making my way back.
without the booze, I've been learning day by day to let it go and stay out of my own way.
Welcome to Speaker Monday with the Monty Man. Each week, Monty brings us speakers from a variety of 12-step fellowships. Now here's the Monty Man with this week's speaker.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speaker Monday. And by the way, for those of you who are listening on the Bill Post Radio Network, I want to say welcome to the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show. Every show, Monday through Friday, is just a little different. Our theme songs are a little different. We like to give you some variety and mix it up. But we just want to let you know, those of you listening at take12radio.com on our website there, and the Bill Post Radio Network, how honored we are to be part of that network now, broadcasting in the state of Oregon and worldwide on the internet, of course. And how grateful we are to Bill Post for taking us on and helping us to share the solution to the problem of the number one health threat in our country today, and that, of course, is addiction. All right. Before we get to this week's speaker, and Mondays, by the way, for those of you who don't know, are dedicated to people that are sharing their experience, strength, and hope, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today as it relates to addiction, codependency, alcoholism, anything where the tail was wagging the dog. And that is what our purpose for doing Speaker Monday is. They're circuit speakers for these. They don't represent these different organizations, but they have been a part of, they have used the tools as organizations and those fellowships have offered to recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. But before we continue and introduce this week's speaker, for those of you who don't know, because there are hundreds of you that are listening for the first or second time on the Bill Post Radio Network. You may have some ideas about what 12-step fellowships are, what they aren't. You may have heard what the 12 steps are. Some of you may have never heard of what the 12 steps are. Now listen, regardless of what you believe, what faith you are or aren't, whatever you think of the whole recovery world, I don't see how anybody with any common sense could argue with the healthy layout of these 12 steps. And I'm just going to read them to you and give you just a very quick explanation of each one, and just to familiarize yourself with them. And perhaps for those of you who know them already, maybe to bone up on your skills here a little bit, maybe. Step number 1, we admitted we were powerless over, and then you can fill in the blank. In this case, I'm going to read alcohol, okay? Admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. This is a 2-part step. First of all, you cannot change, fix, or heal or get well from a problem that you do not recognize. So you have to admit that there's an issue, correct? You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. Secondly, our lives being unmanageable. That doesn't mean consequences necessarily. That means spiritually unmanageable. Something's going on. Something's wrong with our thinking. Something is wrong with our ability to manage our lives properly. So a lot of people think that means that, we got DUIs, or we got fired, or we got divorced, or we ruined somebody else's life. That could be part of it, but that's not at the core of unmanageability. What's at the core of unmanageability is our thinking. So we had to admit something was going on that was wrong and that our thinking was messed up. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. In other words, right thinking. Obviously, what we were doing wasn't working. A power greater than ourselves means not a human power. It doesn't mean your pastor, your rabbi, your priest. It doesn't mean your sponsor. It doesn't mean a spiritual advisor. It doesn't mean anybody in a meeting, an individual or a group of people. It means that a power greater than us could restore us to sanity. Step 3 says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And then it says in italics, as we understood him. And what that means, literally, as we grow to continue to understand God. It doesn't mean that we create God out of our own understanding. It means that we continually grow to understand him. Let's clear that up right there. Step 3, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We had to take stake in our behaviors, inappropriate, as well as some of our character qualities. Any organization, business, or club worth its while takes an inventory of what they have, what they don't have. How can you manage an unmanageable situation unless you take a proper inventory? So we had to do that. It had to be searching. It had to be fearless. It had to be thorough. Step 5, once we've done that, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. It doesn't mean that we said every single one of our wrongs, but the nature of those. Where have we been selfish? Where have we been self-centered? Where had we been insensitive? The nature of our wrongs. It's important that we admitted to our Creator, and of course to ourselves, obviously, and there is power in confession one to another. So we needed to admit to another human being. Particularly those who are members of any particular spiritual faith. Every major lineup of spiritual belief talks about how healing it is to confess one to another the exact nature of whatever it is that you're doing that's causing you pain or others pain. Step 6. We were entirely ready to have God, our Creator, remove all these defects of character. It doesn't mean that they're all going to go away, but we're willing to allow our Creator to come in and to change us. Step 7, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So step 6, we were ready to do that. Step 7, we asked him to do that, holding back nothing. Step 8, we made a list of all the people, all persons we had harmed, and we became willing to make amends to them all. The amends process in a person's recovery, whether you're recovering from alcoholism, drug addiction, overeating, overspending, gossip, sexual addiction, whether you are a codependent, a person who is a people addict, you're always trying to control other people's behavior to be okay with yourself. All those things cause a great deal of harm to other people. And part of the healing process for ourselves and for others is to make amends to those folks. And there is a way that is done properly, a way that it's not done, and it's through the study of these steps that you find out what that is. Step 9 says that we made direct amends to such people, the people we had harmed, whenever possible, with the exception of when to do so would injure them or others. Injuring them or somebody else does not include ourselves. That is not correct. So we say, oh, well, you know what? They may think less of me. They may come after me. I may go to jail if I cop to the fact that I did this or that. I may be inconvenienced. That is not what it's talking about. It's talking about putting your family in a harm's way, putting them in harm's way, and other people. Step 10 says, I continue to take personal inventory, and when I was wrong, I promptly admitted it. It's an ongoing process. It's not a maintenance step. It's an ongoing process of maturing. Step 11 says, I sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I grow to understanding, basically, as we understand it means. Praying only for knowledge of His will for me, or us, and the power to carry that out. And then in step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics, to addicts, to the hurting, whoever, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So the principles that we learn in steps 1 through 11, we try and practice those in our everyday living on a regular basis. And we try to help other people. That's really key in this process of recovery. And listen, once a person has had a spiritual awakening, once they have worked and gone through this step process and done the work, and God has come into their lives in a real way, and there's a relationship, not religious, but a relationship between you and the Creator. Once that has happened, it is our responsibility to give that away to somebody else, to make it available, not to Bible thump, not to big book thump, not to anything thump, but be there, willing, and available to be about the business of doing God's work and helping our fellow man. It's all part of it. That's all part of it. All right. Who you're going to listen to now is Chris Schroeder. He is the chairman of the board of directors here at Take 12 Radio, Recovery Radio, and he is the number 2 most downloaded recovery speaker in the world. And we're going to have more from Chris, but this is a quick overview of his personal story of experience, strength, and hope. So without further ado, here's Chris Schroeder, and after that, we'll come back, close out the show, and get you ready for the Bill Post Radio Show right afterwards. All right, here's Chris.
On or around December 28th, 1989, the grace of God separated me from alcohol for the last time, and for that I'm very, very grateful. I want to start with one of the earliest manifestations of what I believe was my alcoholism. And that took place the day my mother told me that I have to get in the car. She's taking me off to kindergarten. Now, I hadn't gotten out a lot much on my own by this time, so this is a little bit of a traumatic thing for me. And it was so long ago that it was actually a Packard automobile. I don't know if anybody remembers the Packards. But she put me in the car and she drove me into town to the kindergarten place. And I remember her pulling up in the driveway, letting me out, saying, "There's the building," and taking off. And I'm standing on the top of this hill looking down, and what I saw was a bunch of kids just having a blast. They're playing kickball and tag. Looked like they've been friends for 100 years. I felt like an idiot. I was standing there like, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what if I don't fit in? What if they make fun of me? What if I get ostracized? And I had this sense of self-centered fear that just came over me. And at that point in time, I could have used a couple of shots. You know what I mean? Because that is exactly what I needed, standing there looking down at this kindergarten class. Because my problem for the next 7 or 8 years was that I didn't have any alcohol. From that moment forward, I had to act as if everything was okay inside me. To act as if I wasn't afraid or anxious or resentful or whatever my emotional state would be at that time. My first drink, I'm about 12 or 13 years old, and I'm hanging out with a couple of guys, and I thought it would be cool to cut school, go back to my mother's house, and get drunk. I knew there was like a liquor closet there. Now, I don't come from an alcoholic family. I had to blow the dust off of this bottle. So there wasn't a lot of drinking. I feel for you if you come from one of those hellacious alcoholic families. But, I came from a little Cape Cod house, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, cats. I mean, wasn't a big deal. There was never like a harsh word. I was the dysfunction in that family, let me tell you. But anyway, we decided to go back to my house, and I bring down a bottle of Four Roses whiskey. And I don't know anything about drinking. I'm 12, right? But I've seen the John Wayne movies. You know how he busts through the saloon doors and he goes, "Bartender, whiskey!" And the bartender takes a bottle of whiskey and fills up a couple of water glasses or a water glass and hands it to John, and John pounds the water glass down, grabs the bottle, and goes back to the table. So I start pouring out this warm Four Roses whiskey into water glasses and handing it out to my friends. Now, let me tell you what my friends did, and then I'll tell you what I did. My friends had about 2/3 of the glass, and they were good. You ever drink with people like that? I'm good. I'm fine. I'm going home now. What? I live in New Jersey, so it was always like, let's go to the city. It's like 2:00 in the morning. You got to work the next day. So, I never got along with those people who had enough. I'm just going to have two. So anyway, they just had like 2/3 of this glass, and they were fine. And then they watched the show. Okay. I drank 3 glasses of this stuff and whatever they had left, and I went into a blackout, my first blackout. Anybody in here familiar with blackouts? They're unnerving, aren't they? Especially like when you travel, you wake up in Topeka with one shoe or something, Then you have to act like you really want to be there, because you can't look stupid. But anyway, so I go into a blackout, I trash the house, and I have a hangover. One of those hangovers where you have to stay horizontal for about 2 days, you know what I mean? Just horrible feeling. And if I'd have drank or ate anything besides alcohol and felt that bad, I never would have gone near it again. I would have had an adequate mental defense against it. The problem was that scared kindergartner I was talking to you about. When I hit drink number 2, he disappeared. All of a sudden, I felt larger than life. All of a sudden, I was like the coolest guy. That self-centered fear was gone. And I was funny, and I was cool, and I didn't care what you thought of me. And there was all this freedom that I got from the alcohol. So I started to slowly forget how bad it made me feel, and I started to remember what it did for me. It was the anti-Chris elixir that I'd been looking for my whole life. It was something that would let me actually step out and feel okay about it, and not have all this repressed anxiety. So I started drinking. I wasn't going to ever drink Four Roses again, please. But I started to figure out how to drink it. The drinking age was 21 at that time, and I was 13, so it was problematic, but nothing an alcoholic can't overcome. So I started to figure out, where was I going to buy it? Where was I going to drink it? All this stuff. And I started to become preoccupied with alcohol. Now, I come from a really smart family. My brother and sister are both Phi Beta Kappa PhD professors. My mother and father were, top in their class and educators. And I graduated high school second stupidest kid in my class. They used to say, "Chris, you got so much potential." You ever hear that? Yeah. I wish I could have bottled the potential I had. I would have been all right. But anyway, I started to take Wednesdays off to break up the week, things like that, And where's Chris? Oh, it's Wednesday. Oh yeah, it's Wednesday. It's his day off. I mean, I became preoccupied with alcohol, and anything that was going to get in the way of my drinking, had to go. So here I am. I'm terrible grades, like D- minus grades, and I never thought to myself, like, what was happening was I was getting I never said to myself, wow, Chris, you're getting preoccupied with alcohol. You should take a look at that, because if you keep on this way, you may not get into the college of your choice. I didn't think that. You know what I thought? Who cares is what I thought. That's like the rallying war cry of the active alcoholic. Who cares? So anyway, I get out of high school, just barely get out of it, and I took a year off. It was all too much for me, I guess, at that time. I had to take a year off, and I told one person one time that it was to find myself. He goes, "You weren't looking for anything, especially yourself." So I took a year off, and slowly I started to realize a lot of my friends are going to college. They're like getting jobs. They're growing up. And I just loved the high school parties. You remember the high school parties when alcohol was working? if it was working for any of you. I mean, it was working for me for a while. I mean, I felt great, and I'd have a couple of drinks before I got to the party, and then the music would be loud, there'd be dancing, and there'd be a fight. You'd molest the women, and they'd be okay with it. I mean, it was just a great time, and everybody's gone. The high school is over, and I'm still like looking for that party, for that feeling, and everybody's gone. It got to the point where the people I had to hang out with to continue on, they didn't even have real names. They were like Weezer and Green Man. Those are people I ended up partying with at the end. So, I mean, the milkman could have seen that I was on a decline, that my drinking was just wiping me out. But I kept thinking I had everything under control. Well, I hooked up with a marvelous codependent somewhere along the way. I after high school, she thought of me as much as I did, so it worked out great. And she's a perfect. She'd pick up all the pieces. After a car crash, she'd go get the car out of impound and all those things that you need done, and bail money and all that. And we ended up setting up house. I moved down to Florida because a friend of mine said, "Chris, you got to get down here, man. You wouldn't believe the parties down here." So I went down there, and I am not a paragon of maturity at this point in time, right? I had absolutely no business being with this person. We ended up getting married, and because she was Catholic, 9 months to the nanosecond later, my daughter was born. You could have set your watch to it. So all of a sudden, I've got this family, and I'm like, she wanted me to put insurance on the car and, come home at night and, stop spending the weekend with Weezer and Green Man and all this stuff. It's just unreasonable. Get a job. I mean, get off my back. I just couldn't deal. So that didn't last. I mean, I couldn't offer what a family needed. I was, way too into the booze and way too immature. So she left me, and now I'm really drinking because she left me when I needed her most. I mean, is that a great excuse? So I'm shacked up with a couple of one guy's a Quaalude salesman. Another guy's been on unemployment for like 4 years. These are like my roommates, and I'm just drinking. I'm out of my mind drinking. I'm crashing cars. I'm getting DWIs. I'm waking up in jail wondering why I'm there. And I found out that you don't wake up your bunkmate and ask them. They get upset. So I learned a lot in my and never ever say keep in touch to the people that you meet in jail. Oh, that was a hard lesson to learn. Anyway, so she leaves me, and it got to the point where the world was falling in on me. The cops were looking for me. I hadn't done my community service. Hospital bills, ambulance bills. I decide, what are you going to do? I decide, my mother needs a little help around the house back home. I think I'll move back and give my mother some help back at the house, because that's what a macho guy does when you got nothing left to do. So I moved back home with Mom for 8 years, and I was like the last 8 years of my drinking. God bless her. I'm still making amends. But I'm back in town, and somewhere along the line, I become an electrician. I don't know how that happened, because I was not a good one. I was a bad electrician. I would blow things up, and I'd drill into your closet and pull your good suits through the ceiling. I mean, this one time I'm drilling a hole for new computer cash registers coming around. So I'm drilling a hole in the floor with this big drill with a big auger bit, and it had a locking trigger, and I'm not paying attention because it's the lingerie section of this department store. So I'm preoccupied, and the thing gets away from me. So I bear down on it, and I accidentally lock the trigger, and it spins me around a circle and ties me up in the cord, and the auger bit rips the pants off my ass. So all of a sudden, finally, it unplugs from the wall, and I'm tied up to this drill with no pants, and in the lingerie section, and everybody's looking at me, and you got to be cool, right? So I'm like, oh yeah, things always get away from me like this. So I'm like a really bad electrician. Terrible things are happening. this one day I come in and I'm so hungover I can't put the ground screw in the outlet box. And this is how good I'm 33 at this time, okay? This is my career. I'm 33, and the boss put a 19-year-old kid in charge of me. Yeah. That's how much faith he had in me. So I'm sitting there trying to get this screw in the outlet box, and the 19-year-old kid's looking at me like, you pathetic, no good, no account, because I can tell what he's thinking. When you're an alcoholic, you can hear people thinking at you. So I knew right away what this guy was thinking, and I just couldn't take it. I mean, I'd lost a family. I had 3 DWIs. I totaled 9 cars in drunken blackouts. I mean, lost all my friends. I mean, even Weezer and Green Man weren't talking to me anymore. So what did it take? It took not being able to put this screw in an outlet box for me to finally say, I've had enough. And I signed myself into a rehab. I remember got really drunk, get up the courage to make the call. I call them up, I go, I'm coming in. They're like, well, who are you, first of all? And so anyway, I go into this place, and I did the 28 days, and I got the $13,000 big book and the pat on the butt to AA, and off I went to AA. Now, I didn't understand the first step. I really didn't. I thought the first step was, I need to remember not to drink. I need to remember not to drink. That's what I need to do. So if I go to a couple of AA meetings every week, that'll remind me not to drink. Well, I didn't have a clue what the first step was. I was going to 2 AA meetings and 2 outpatient meetings, and I got to tell you, I wanted to stay away from booze as much as anybody ever wanted to stay away from booze. I had a desire to not drink anymore. Let me tell you, it was killing me. I wasn't even pushed into the rehab. I voluntarily went in because I knew I needed help. I voluntarily went to outpatient and paid $35 a night to hear some muttonhead talk about their personal problems, and hopefully get something out of it. And on this one, I'm going to AA meetings. It's like castor oil treatment to me. Going to an AA meeting was just really tough. It was not fun for me. But that's how much I wanted to stay separated from alcohol. Now, on the way to an AA meeting one day, the thought crosses my mind. I haven't been drunk in almost 90 days. I hardly can remember what it's like to be drunk. And, I'm not really doing a lot in the AA. They've got some other suggestions, and I don't really... I bet you if I bought a gallon of vodka, took it home and drank it, I'd do AA better. So I bought a gallon of vodka and drank it to improve my sobriety. Imagine running that one by your sponsor. I mean, and of course I didn't have one. So 6 months later, Christmas at the Schroeder's. Okay, this is 1989. My mother's there, brother, sister, nieces, nephews, cats, the whole deal. They're all there for Christmas, and I start drinking, and I go into a violent blackout where I threaten all their lives. It's Christmas. I'm going to kill all of you. I'm going to kill every one of you. And that really wasn't the festive type of spirit everybody was looking for. So they picked up their Christmas and they took it elsewhere, thank you. I come out of this blackout. It's like a multi-day blackout. I come out of it and I'm shaking, and I go in the kitchen and there's a pile of vodka bottles in the sink like this. I don't even remember buying them. Must have been some site, because I used to buy 1 bottle at a time because I might quit. You ever do that when you're smoking? You buy like 1 pack at a time because you might quit tomorrow. So it must have been a site just going back and forth uptown getting the vodka. Anyway, I start to go into the DTs. Anybody in here ever have the DTs? You know what I'm talking about. It's not pretty. There was animals running around the room, and there was things scratching on the side of the house to try to get in, and the slip covers had maggots and bugs all over it, and I'm laying there, and a demon comes out of the ceiling. I mean, really, really great stuff. And I remember when I saw the demon, I just screamed out, "God help me!" like that. And it was the first humble asking from God for anything that I think I can remember. And I really meant it because I was absolutely desperate. And I haven't had a drink since then. Now, after I finally got to the point where I could get out, I knew I needed to get to an AA meeting. Had to get back to AA. But the car I had at that time was a 1976 Ford Granada with no clutch, no parking brake, no heater core, no muffler. So, I mean, I was busy. I didn't have time really to fix this thing. You know how we are. So because there's no clutch, I have to find a meeting that's flat. So I'm looking at a book, and I've got to find a Sunday night meeting that's flat. I find this meeting in Morristown, New Jersey, and I get there, and this car is just a piece of crap, one of those Quaalude cars. Anyway, I come pulling up, and there's a church, similar to this, and there's all kinds of steps outside, and a million of my peers are outside having a cigarette. Now, I have to pull in, and I have to go up the hill a little bit to get into the parking lot. There's no clutch, right? No muffler. So I've got to gun this thing to get up this tiny little incline. So I got to go, blah! Just to go like up 4 feet. And you can see the people like standing there on the stairs like, look at me, must be a new guy, And I had to go park the car against a tree because it had no parking brake, and I was afraid it'd roll away while I was in the meeting. So anyway, I'm in the meeting. I'm in the meeting now. I'm terror-stricken from this detox. I mean, I'm shattered, and I sit down and I don't realize it, but it's a step meeting, and everybody's reading a paragraph out of the step book, and they're coming down the aisle at me, right? I'm like, oh my God, I can't even hold the book, let alone read a paragraph. So what do? I got the hell out of there. I went outside, and I'm standing on the steps, and I'm smoking a cigarette, and I'm thinking to myself, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to do AA? Am I going to be able to stay here? Because I know if I don't stay here, I'm going to die. Do I have to go die? Is there going to be a way to stay? I mean, it was one of those real pivotal moments for me. And this guy, I'll never forget, this guy named Jorge comes out, and he starts asking me some questions like, what's going on with you? And I'm like, relapses, demons, are just terrible. And he goes, well, I'll tell you what. Well, come on back into the meeting with me, and, tomorrow, there's this meeting tomorrow in my hometown, and I was going to go to this meeting. And he knew what tomorrow meant, because you know what tomorrow means. He knew what tomorrow meant. So he insisted. He said, no, you're coming back into the meeting. And he drags me back in. He sits me down in the second row. And by now, the sharing had started, and people are raising their hands and sharing. And he looks at me and he goes, now raise your hand and tell everybody you're coming back. And I'm like, well, tomorrow, there's this meeting tomorrow. Everybody introduces himself as no. He goes, raise your hand and tell her. He's starting to get loud now, so people are looking at me. And you know what happens after they start looking at you? It's not just a minute later they're going to be thinking at you. So I got to do something. So I shoot my hand up right in the middle of somebody sharing. And, the person in the front's a little confused, but, cuts the person off and shuts the person up and then calls on me. And I said something like this. Oh, it's Chris, I'm going out there drinking, relapse, demons, just terrible, thank you. And everything's quiet for a minute, and then all of a sudden it was, yay! They all start cheering, I'm thinking, my God, this is the lowest point in my life, and everybody's like happy for me, and they're smiling, and I can just, and I had problems until I listened to you. I could hear them. So anyway, I got myself a sponsor. I got myself a home group. I did what they asked me to do because everything else, the other things were just, I couldn't even imagine going on the way I was going on. So I got myself a sponsor, and I started to get really active in AA. I mean, really active. I was doing maybe 14 meetings a week. I was a secretary over here. I was driving the boobies from the hatch to the meeting over there. And I was doing everything you could do. I was a coffee maker. And sometimes the tugboats with the most steam pull the boats. So I was slowly giving good share. So people were like asking me to sponsor them. So I'm getting really active. But that scared little kindergartner is still inside me. That the emotional unmanageability is still on me. I still get really resentful. I still have a lot of self-centered fear. I've got guilt and remorse out the wazoo. All this stuff. I'm just burdened with self. You know what I mean? But I'm doing everything in AA, so I'm sober, but I'm not recovered. And this guy, Radio Shack Mike, we used to nickname everybody back then. Radio Shack Mike. gave me a bunch of tapes. One time he gave me some Louise Hay tape, affirmation tapes, where you're supposed to plug it in and say to yourself in front of a mirror, Chris, you're a wonderful guy. Chris, you're a wonderful guy. And you're supposed to do it until you believe it. Like, I remember breaking the tape in half. I mean, like, I'm an insane alcoholic. Trying to treat my alcoholism with an affirmation tape is like trying to stop a semi with a cobweb. You know what I mean? So I don't trust him, but he comes back to me. He comes back to me with these tapes, and he goes, you're hardcore, man. You might like these guys. I go, who are they? He goes, a couple of guys, Joe and Charlie from Arkansas. I'm like, Arkansas? Arkansas? I'm from the Northeast. We do more thinking before 9 o'clock than an Arkansasian does all day. What are they going to tell me? But I have a long ride to work, okay? So I've got some time. So I start plugging these tapes in. And here's what they told me. They said, Chris, you don't have a program. Everything you're doing is fellowship. You're fellowshipping out the gazoo, but you don't have a program. And if you don't get a program and you're alcoholic, you're going to die. So I've got my first big resentment in AA, listening to these tapes. I put them off to the side like, what do they know? But I'll tell you what, there's a place in the big book that talks about if we've disturbed you about your alcoholism, this is all to the good. And that's what Joe and Charlie did. They disturbed me about my alcoholism. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I didn't have a program. The steps, absolutely. This is a 12-step program. This is not a meeting program. It's a 12-step program. So somewhere about 6 months later, I take these tapes out because in my area in 1989 and 1990, there weren't a lot of big book meetings. There weren't a lot of big book workshops. There weren't a lot of sponsors that would take you over to their house and take you through the big book. That wasn't what they did back then. So I remember listening to these tapes and opening up the big book and to the best of my ability doing the resentment inventory and the fear inventory and the harms to others inventory. And then I got together a list of people that I'd harmed, and I went out and to the best of my ability made direct amends to those people. And I actually started to work a program, and I started to feel a lot better. I mean, incredibly. That bondage of self started to dissipate. Now, I had been sponsoring a number of people, and they were drinking on me. You ever have sponsees drink on you, make you look bad? Well, I didn't want to deal with that, so I started bringing them over to my house and doing what I did with this, opening up the big book and going through the big book with these guys. And I found out something very significant. The people who went through the process with me, not only did they get sober, but they're all still around. They're all card-carrying AA members in good standing, and their quality of life is out of the atmosphere. They're amazing things are happening to them. Am I grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous? I got to tell you, there's nothing I'm more grateful for. I was a bad electrician when I first got sober. I've worked my way up to managing a pretty big piece of business. I've got like 60 employees. Let me tell you, you wouldn't put me in charge of a lemonade stand, when I was new. So things are going great there. I ended up meeting a wonderful woman in recovery. Boy meets girl on AA campus, and trouble soon follows. Met, absolute wonder. We've been married 11 years now, and that's just absolutely amazing. And she sponsors a million women, and you come over to our house, and somebody's going through the steps, or somebody's in crisis, or the phone's ringing. I mean, we have a real recovery house. And some of the people who've been over there say it's just a safe, wonderful, comforting place. And that's the exact opposite of wanting to kill everybody over Christmas, I mean, if you're, there's a lot of people who've raised their hand with under 90 days. There's two things that's absolutely true in your case that you don't believe right now. One of them is you're in much more trouble than you think you are. If you're under 90 days, you are minimizing like a sumbitch. Okay? Alcoholism is much worse than you're giving it credit for. The second truth is there's more answers in Alcoholics Anonymous than you believe there are. There are answers in Alcoholics Anonymous for practically everything. As I started working the steps and as I started to recover, I started to be able to deal with other things in my life, with the other things that I thought were separate from my alcoholism. So if you are new and you're coming back and, it seems like life is dealing you a rotten hand, let me tell you, positive actions result in positive results. And that's really what Alcoholics Anonymous is. It's spiritual living 101. So I encourage everybody that's in here under 90 days to stay. It's not okay to leave Alcoholics Anonymous and go out there and have alcoholism trash your life again. It's not okay. It's much better to stay in here. Find yourself a sponsor who's experienced with the steps, and then become of service. Find ways to become of service. This group is just unbelievable with the service. I wish my group was half as involved with service commitments and things like this. Again, I want to thank Vince for asking me to come in tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to speak at your group, and God bless all of you.
All right. Thank you, Chris. What a great opportunity to listen to someone's personal story of recovery from alcoholism. Hey, listen, I want to share with you now a piece that is out of the book that is called Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, no, remember this. I do not represent Alcoholics Anonymous. I do not claim membership at Alcoholics Anonymous. I simply don't do that. What I am telling you, though, is that I have experience around the 12-step process. I've been doing it for a long, long time, and quite frankly, it would not be appropriate for me to divulge what 12-step fellowship I participate in, and at some point, we can discuss that and talk about why that's important. But what I do want to make sure that you understand is that one of the reasons that people are not convinced that recovery works is because the people that it has worked for have spent a great deal of time hiding in the basements of their churches and meeting halls, afraid to share their experience, strength, and hope, and share their personal stories in the name of misunderstanding what anonymity means. There is a tradition within 12-step fellowships that talks about personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And it is important. It is vital. There's reasons for it that we don't have time to go into right now. Perhaps we will do that in future shows. But that does not mean, anonymity does not mean secrecy. It doesn't mean that we hide from people. It doesn't mean we don't share our stories. What it means is we don't claim that we represent any particular 12-step fellowship. We just don't do that. All right? Because quite frankly, we don't represent them. But people don't understand that this thing works because the people that it's worked for have been afraid to say anything. Well, that's changing, and that's getting better. You can share your personal story. You can get very deep in how this thing has worked for you without violating that tradition of anonymity. You can do that. And so that's what we do. So having said that, I am going to read out of a book that has helped assist people recover from particularly alcoholism and other addictions. What's called Alcoholics Anonymous, or affectionately by AA members, is called the Big Book. And I'm going to read this to you because this can be applied in anyone's life. See if you don't get this. Check this out. This actually is after steps 1 and steps 2. Step 1 meaning that understanding that you're powerless. And aren't we all powerless over other people's choices? Really, when you get down to it, don't they really make their own choices? Don't we all suffer from unmanageability in our lives in one way or another? And don't we all need a spiritual solution? Well, in step 3, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. But listen to how this starts out. It says, the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. I think most of us would be hard-pressed to argue with that. It goes on to say, on that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. But most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show and is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his or her own way. If our arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as we wished, well, the show would be great. Everybody, including ourselves, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, we as actors may sometimes be quite virtuous. We may be kind. We may be considerate. We may be patient. We may be generous, even modest, and self-sacrificing. Ever met somebody like that? Have you been like that? I have. In trying to control other people and other situations, we're just so nice. We're so kind. We're considerate and patient and generous. We're modest. We're self-sacrificing, right? Right? But now check this out. On the other hand, we may be mean, egotistical, selfish. We may even be dishonest. I have done that. Have you done that? In trying to control others? Now listen, you guys, I know that you have been guilty, just as I have, in trying to make other people do and act the way you want them to do and act. Why? Because we're uncomfortable with the way other people are behaving. Our self-worth, our self-esteem has been based on other people's behavior and them fulfilling our expectations in order to be okay with ourselves. Come on now. If you really get God honest, you'll see where we've all done that. And so sometimes we're this nice person to try to get people to behave right? Or sometimes we're mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most human beings, we have varied traits. We go back and forth. Sometimes we're nice, sometimes we're mean, sometimes we're obviously controlling, sometimes not so obvious. Well, this is what happens. The show doesn't come off very well, does it? See, we begin to think life doesn't treat us right. We decide to exert ourselves even more. We become, on the next occasion of control, still more demanding or more gracious. Whatever the case may be, still, the play does not suit us. It just doesn't fulfill our expectations. You know what I'm talking about, right? This is the kind of stuff we do. And here's the deal. You don't have to be alcoholic or addicted to be this way, to live like this. Angry, indignant, self-pitying. My goodness sakes, we all suffer from this to a certain degree. So in the big book, it says, what is his or her basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is he or she not a victim of the delusion that he can risk satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only or she only manages things well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he or she wants? And do not his actions or her actions make each of them wish to retaliate? And is he or she not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Our actor is self-centered and egocentric. Boy, I got to tell you, I've been guilty of that. I lived my life like that for a long time. And I would venture to say that there are still times when I can be that way, when I can act that way. We are always trying to manipulate each other in one form or another. I take that back. Not always, but many times we do that. I'll give you an example, and this is going to be really kind of an eye-opener for some of you. Listen, I went to I attended Bible college at San Jose Bible College in San Jose years ago. and which is now William Jessup University in Sacramento. And when I was taking a class that was all about the art of preaching, now believe I'm not ditching on San Jose Bible College or any Bible college for that matter. It was a great experience. It was a wonderful learning experience. It was an educational experience that people should not miss. But I took a class on the art of preaching, and one of the things that they taught us was how to manipulate the audience so that they would get more out of your sermon than if you didn't manipulate them. Now, the motive for this was good. It was to help people understand what you were trying to teach on Sunday morning, right? But I thought it was very interesting, looking back, how we manipulate people. And here's one of the ways that we were taught. Choose certain songs out of the hymnal or certain modern contemporary Christian songs that would prepare the audience emotionally to be more receptive to the topic you were going to preach on. So if you were going to teach a lesson or preach a sermon on self-sacrifice, then you might choose a song like The Old Rugged Cross that was about the ultimate sacrifice. You see my point? So you chose songs that would kind of get people emotionally ready to receive the message. Another thing that we were taught to do, and this was a really good thing, was never, when you tell the congregation what scripture verse to look up in the Bible, make sure you don't have that bookmarked in your Bible first. Make sure that you're looking it up at the same time that they're looking it up. So they don't feel, or so you don't feel like you're waiting on them. So you don't feel uncomfortable. So there's no pause. So if you say 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and they're looking it up, you're looking it up too. 1 Corinthians chapter 4. These are helpful hints, helpful tools to have a successful time during church. Is it all bad and terrible? No, but see, my point is we do certain things to arrange the actors, to arrange all the players in the play of life for that particular day. And if they don't do it the way we want them to do it, then we get really uncomfortable and we're not sure what to do, and it's so frustrating. And so are all those things necessarily bad things? No, not necessarily, but we do it, even in the best of circumstances. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that every form of guiding people along to get them prepared to receive whatever it is you need to bring forth is wrong. I'm just saying we do it. And because we're human, our flesh gets involved, and sometimes we can really mess things up. And this is something that people that live with addiction, people that are family members that live with addiction, experience all the time and act out. We're going to be talking more about things like that in coming shows, but because we are almost out of time, it's time for us to sign off. Listen, I'm so glad you joined us here. If you're listening at take12radio.com, or if you're listening on the Bill Post Radio Network at billpost.com, it has been an absolute pleasure. It's just been an honor to celebrate, by the way, 10 years of broadcasting, recovery talk, and positive music at take12radio.com, and now joining up on the Bill Post Radio Network. So, hey, listen, if you're listening on Bill Post, he's coming up right after this. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty Man wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye.
Without the booze, I've been living, that's a fact. Without the booze,
I've been making my way back.
without the booze, I've been learning day by day to let it go and stay out of my own way. Stay out of my own way.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.